total error. I'm here to tell you what I think now. I've been this stuff since August of 1958. My dad was a career soldier, was stationed first in France and then in Germany. I saw the collapse of the French Fourth Republic. I saw the end of the period of the Algerian War. I saw what wars do to people. And I decided I was going to be either a zoo director or a vertebrate paleontologist. But I decided that the fate of countries requires leadership. And so literally 50 years ago last month, I began studying and doing what I've done ever since. I think in my lifetime, this may be the most interesting campaign. It's absolutely extraordinary. It's extraordinary, first of all, because you see the emergence of the new media. You see fundraising on the internet. You see Facebook and YouTube, and you see all sorts of things happening that are totally different than we would have ever seen 20 years ago. It's fascinating. Second, because the country's at a point of enormous conversation with itself. And I'm going to summarize at a big macro level and then come down to the candidates and then toss it to you for questions. The conversation basically starts with the fact that the Republicans failed. And I say this with great sadness because I was an active student of Reagan starting in '74. I campaigned with him. I served in Congress when he was president. I built the contract with America by standing on his shoulders and taking his ideas. And most of our greatest reforms, such as welfare reform, were really derived from Reagan. And I thought we were at the edge of creating a generation of effective reform conservatism that would have governed very, very successfully. And frankly, they just threw it away. And they threw it away because they forgot that ideas matter, and that reform matters, and that power without ideas is nihilism. And so they became money-grubbing betrayers of public trust, and as a result, in 2006, they were punished. And I think they deserved it. And I think the question now is how fast they can learn a new lesson. And they have this remarkable moment because, for reasons I'll describe in a minute, Obama's not really in the right position to take advantage of it. And McCain and Palin may be the perfect ticket to take advantage of it. And you could not have predicted, you couldn't write a novel like this. It's not possible. So then what happens? Okay, first of all, I always thought that Senator Clinton would be the nominee, and I thought she would almost certainly be the president. And the reason was simple. The Republicans had had 8 years. They had not succeeded in governing effectively. The country was ready for a change. She is a competent professional. She is an established figure. She has a nationwide network. She's a relatively well-tested person. And I thought the country was clearly ready for a woman president. Now, Obama comes along in one of those wonderful things, and let me say up front, I am really proud to be an American. I am really excited by American exceptionalism. I really think this is an amazing country. My relatives were all relatively poor. They all worked very, very hard. My father was the first person in our family to ever go to college. And so, I look out and I think, this is an amazing country which has opened to talent in a way that no other country in the world is. So along comes this guy, whose father was a Kenyan, his mother's from Kansas. He's basically largely raised by his grandmother. He goes to the best elite school in Hawaii. He then gets to go to Columbia and Harvard. He then decides he'll go to Chicago. It's an interesting question, which I don't think anyone's ever fully asked him, is you're sitting there in Harvard, why did you pick Chicago? I mean, it's okay to say I wanted to be a community organizer. Well, why? I mean, why Chicago? You could have been a community organizer in Boston. You could have gone back to Honolulu, which, by the way, is a pretty cool place to organize. I mean, if you're gonna So it's interesting, but he decides to go to Chicago, which has one of the great democratic machines, and is a great place to learn politics, and Mayor Richie Daley is one of the best mayors in the country. And he rises. And his first book is almost entirely autobiographical. I mean, it's a little bit like Churchill's autobiography, My Life as a Young Man, except in the case of Obama, he wrote it while he was a young man. Then his, and so he runs and loses against Bobby Rush for Congress. He wins a Senate seat, then he wins a U.S. Senate seat. He is cleverly picked by the Democrats to be their keynote speaker in 2004, which marks him for future greatness. And my hunch is that Clinton was thinking, wouldn't he be a great vice presidential candidate? And then he decides to run for president. Now, he has, I think, 4 great advantages. The first is he is really articulate and eloquent and a great public communicator. At a time when people are so tired of Bush's inability to communicate That there's a, I mean, there's one of those moments when there's a premium on communication because you've had 8 years of non-communication. So communication is kind of overvalued right now. It's kind of like, gosh, I'm desperate for a great speech, and here's Obama. The second great advantage he had was Oprah Winfrey. Well, these things are facts. I mean, Oprah Winfrey is arguably the most widely respected personality on television. And if you go back and look at the show where she introduced him, she could not have been more positive. And that meant that an audience of millions, all the people who buy the books that she tells you to go buy, I mean, look at her book list, look at her impact with her magazine. All of those people looked up and said, gosh, he's really worth looking at. So now you have a very articulate guy who's really worth looking at. Third, he had figured out, whether by belief or by design is irrelevant, but he had figured out to come from the left. Now, I think I think he had decided this very early. Whenever he went from Barry to Barack as his first name, whenever he decided in Chicago to hang out with William Ayers and to hang out the terrorist and to hang out at the church he went to, he had decided to come from the left. If you look at his campaigns, he came from the left. So that means that he can be the anti-war candidate. Nobody else could really be the anti-war candidate, and it meant that MoveOn.org, which is the largest activist group in the Democratic Party, had a candidate. So suddenly you have a nationwide network behind a very articulate person who has been legitimized by Oprah. And then one other thing. Partly because of the quality of the people who were surrounding him. And I give Obama tremendous credit. He put together an extraordinary campaign. He attracted remarkable talent. He allowed them to go do what they do best. But he had several billionaires who had made their money on the internet. And so if you look at his internet campaign, it is far and away the most advanced and the best in the country. I mean, how many of you get Obama emails?